Check out this dope shit. Get
Okay kids, remember your EFI will never have the snap like these carbs do. There's something special about mechanical fuel and air dancing together, and that's worth appreciating.
Picked up the big valve C heads from the machine shop today. That just all I had them do was just basically rough the valve job in for me, so I kind of knew roughly where the seats are going to be. So now I can get to porting this thing. So I've been doing a little bit of work here on these OldsPwr heads. I'm just kind of getting started on the intake ports. As you can see, this one is still kind of in the roughed out area. One thing I wanted to note is that this little ledge here, you don't always want to take that out. Kind of what happens if you were to go take it out completely, you kind of lose a slight Venturi effect right here when the fuel and air enter the port. So when I do like a street head, I usually don't take that out completely. I take it out a good portion of it, and I just kind of transition it into the port as good as I can with what I'm working with here. These C heads, honestly, they're not terrible. As soon as you get in there and you start kind of working things around and stuff, they come into a nice shape relatively quickly without getting too crazy. The big thing with these heads is I'm going to be focusing basically on the intake port on these things. I'm gonna just come in here on the exhaust ports and just kind of clean them up and take some of this casting flash out of here, so we get good port velocity out of the port, or out of the cylinder I should say, to evacuate the spent gases and whatnot. Then after I'm done here, I'm gonna put in a used valve, like an old one, into this intake port as well as the exhaust. And I'm going to come in here, I'm just going to remove this little slight ledge here, as you can kind of see here. And kind of what I mean is this little bump right here that you can feel with the pick. This little bump will inhibit airflow in the low lift area. So what I kind of do is I come in here, I put an old valve in here, and that way it keeps you from bumping in the seat with your grinding tool. And you can kind of come in here and just kind of lay this edge back and blend it into the chamber. Like, I'm not saying get crazy in here, but I'm saying, you know, all the way around the seat here, just come in here and just kind of blend this step out of here and get that out of there on all of these cylinders. Like I said, you don't got to go crazy with it. Obviously, this is a relatively large chamber, and you don't want to be having to deck this thing excessively because you took too much material out of the chamber. So like I said, I'm just going to come in there, I'm just going to kind of lay that step away and just make it so it blends into the port as good as I can. Now on the intake port, I always like to leave these things on the rough side, especially on a street head. You know, you still need that roughness to kind of assist with air and fuel atomization. So you don't want to get too carried away and make things too nice, too pretty, too smooth. I mean, I know the day of CNC machines and everything, a guy usually has a tendency to kind of make things look real nice and aesthetic. You know, that's not always necessarily the best way to port a cylinder head. A lot of porters would potentially agree with that. And like I said, there's a lot of guys out there that port cylinder heads. I mean, you ask, you know, 20 porters what would be the best way to do something, you know, you're probably going to get 20 different answers. So take all this with a grain of salt. I'm not telling you this is the perfect way to do it, but this is how I do it, and my stuff runs relatively pretty decent. So like I said, you don't got to take too much meat out of these things to make them run pretty good. Like I said, the port shape from the factory isn't awful. It's just a little on the small side for a big inch motor like this. Like I said, I just would not expect nothing crazy out of this thing, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time you know, trying to wring every last bit of airflow out of these cylinder head castings and potentially compromise the casting. Because you know, a guy can get awfully carried away, and all of a sudden, you know, you're blowing a hole in the casting, and you know, you're having to start all over again, and all that hard work that you've spent on a casting plus sourcing another set of castings. You know, these things are getting harder and harder to find. You know, some guys are hoarding them. You know I kind of looked around for quite a while to find these castings in the shape that they're in. And like I said, you know, I think, you know, some of these things like this, when you're trying to keep something, you know, a little bit more on the stockish side, you know, sometimes less is more, you know, for longevity wise. Like I said, you can easily get carried away with this stuff, and all of a sudden you have a giant paperweight. So I just wanted to show you guys, kind of give you guys an update on kind of what these things look like. I still kind of intend to come in here and kind of thinning down the guide a little bit. And we did end up replacing the guides on these heads. And we are running a 45-degree seat on the intake and the exhaust. So like I said, we're not going for the gusto with this thing. We just want a nice, reliable port that, you know, a average Joe fella like myself can enjoy on the weekends and just have a nice, you know, stoplight to stoplight kind of a car. We're not looking to go crazy with this particular set of castings. So just kind of keep that in mind. We are not going for the gusto here. We're looking for a street machine, kind of a combo on pump gas for this particular test.